What's the most scariest paranormal activity you or someone you know have ever experienced? When we lived in my old house, I experienced a lot of weird ghostly-like things, but the worst of them all was somewhere at night. My sister and I kept our doors open because it was really hot during that time period. During that time 3 weeks ago, my grandpa's dad has passed away, but we do clearly remember him. He was a great man, honestly. My sister and I went to bed leaving our doors open because it was hot again. We both woke up somewhere in the night because of some kind of anxious feeling striking in our hearts, or at least that was the case for me. After a while, I looked outside the door and I saw a big shadow-like figure, and we got scared to death. I heard my sister scream in her room. After like 5 seconds of it standing there looking at us, it disappeared. I stood up and went to my sister crying. She told me she saw the shadow too and got extremely freaked out. A few years later from that moment, I remembered this shadow. Back then, I didn't realize, but now I noticed he had the shape of my grandpa's dad. Perhaps he came to see us. Another story, my mom went to work and my dad was working in his garage, so my older sister OS, my younger sister YS and me were in the kitchen because my OS was going to cook since nobody else had the time to. As we were goofing around like we usually do, we saw the knife sharpener just jump off the counter. Like it actually leaped. My YS and OS instantly turned around, of course, as we all began thinking what even happened there. After a while, we all calmed down and ate our food, but we didn't want to touch that knife sharpener for a good while. This story doesn't really have anyone else to confirm except myself, but it still freaks me out a lot. I hated the halls where you needed to go upstairs to our room because I always felt like someone was watching me. Sometimes I even thought I felt breathing, but of course, I don't see anyone or anything. As I was going up the stairs, I was looking around because of the feeling of being watched when my eyes crossed the closet. From the start, I always thought that closet was cursed, but what I saw was only a face with missing eyes looking at me, but it also seemed like its face was changing or perhaps melting. I ran downstairs as fast as possible, running to my mom. No one ever saw the ghost except me. Sometimes I see it in my corner of my eye or in the window of my room. Some years later from that closet moment, my sisters and I were talking about all kinds of things, and the subject of paranormal things came up. My OS was talking about this thing in her dreams with no eyes changing its face's shape. She couldn't move in her dream. She said its face changed to my dad's face. Which made sense to me. Why? Because we had quite the toxic relationship with our dad. I freaked out so bad, I told my sisters that I was seeing the same thing. Honestly, I believe that house was haunted since I haven't seen that thing since my mom divorced my dad and moved somewhere else. I still hate that house. As a young kid, my best friends and I loved playing in the woods and building forts. Like boys do. Well, one day, we spent like 6 hours with his older sister building this really cool fort in a ditch, made a roof of sticks, got rid of all the leaves, made seats carved into the sides of the ditch. The works. It was something that would have lasted at least a few months with all the work we put in. Next day she had to work, so my friend and I decided we'd go back to our cool fort and hang out. In order to get to it, we had to hike down this steep hill they called Boiler Hill, if memory serves me right there. Anyway, we get down the hill and walk to the fort. Once there, we see it. The roof is shattered, the carved wall seats are completely destroyed, there were literal months worth of cobwebs all over the place that weren't there the day before when we built it. We were freaked at that point. But then something, no idea what, maybe a dog. Something started fleeing howling out there. It was big. Both of us bolted. We ran right the flurbo up Boiler Hill without once looking back. We ran all the way back to his house where we locked all the doors and windows. Eventually we calmed down and just stayed inside the rest of the day playing trombone and Metal Gear. Second was with another friend and his 2 younger brothers, and was something we saw repeat several times during one summer. Growing up in my neighborhood, my little brother and I were the only kids for years. Then we met a new kid who lived with his dad across the lake from us during the summers, starting when we were around 12 to 13. Kid's dad was an odd fella, but had a flipping huge house. Anyway, we stayed the night there a lot in the summers, and the basement was where all us kids played to stay out of his dad's way. One summer, we were playing with blacklights in the dark. That got boring, and we figured out that strobe lights made things look like cool old movies. We did that for a bit too. Then, we got bored and just unplugged it all and turned on the PlayStation. About 20 minutes in, the fleeting strobe lights started to randomly flash. Unplugged. We decided to test it further. We turned on the lights, made sure they were in phase unplugged. They were, and then we wrapped their cords up and put them in the middle of the floor with nothing around them. Then we shut out the lights. And wouldn't you know it, the fleeting thing started to randomly flash. Not strobe. Just flash, once or twice here and there. We got freaked TF out, so we put them in the closet and left all the lights on any time we played in the basement after that. When I was age 9, I was having dinner with my family and was told I wasn't allowed to watch a favorite program which I was promised, therefore, I fell into a stroppy mood. At the time, we had just moved Thailand, Bangkok to live in England only a few months before the experience, so we could be closer to family and my parents' hometown. We were living in a 3-bedroom house, pretty run down as we had hardly any money. As my stroppy mood went on, I got worse and worse, regulating in me just running to my room and slamming and locking the door from my family. Note, all windows were shut and it wasn't windy. After around 5 minutes of sulking, I began to hear a high-pitch ringing in my ear, then silence. Everything went quiet. All I felt was a low hum in the back of my head, as then I heard a weird click. I believe it was the lock. Suddenly, my door flung open as though it had been kicked open though. I couldn't see anyone standing in the doorway. I was sat on my bed in the corner of the room, frozen. I was yelling out to my parents, but had no response till my door had slammed shut and kept opening. I began to start hyperventilating and was in shock till my door swung open one last time, but more as though it had been gently pushed as it glided open. Nothing happened for about 30 seconds until I felt a gentle blow on my ear. At that point, I ran downstairs screaming to my parents, screaming, asking why they were opening and shutting my door, and who left the windows open as it was winter. My mum then replied with, "Stop shouting, you've only been up sulking for not even 2 minutes." I still haven't been able to visit back to the street where I first lived in England since, and I never want to. The time I lived there was one of the darkest times in my life. I'm a hardcore skeptic and I don't believe in anything supernatural. This one thing that happened got me creeped out, but it has 100 explanations. Anyway, someone might find it creepy or interesting. Supposedly, no one lives in the apartment above mine. The building isn't very old, maybe 20 years. We don't have creaky elevators, and there's nothing wooden either, but noise travels in a weird way in buildings. Well, despite no one living above us, I hear noises coming from right above my room and our living room, usually after midnight. I rarely go to sleep after 2 a.m., so I DK for how long it happens. The noises I hear are like people moving heavy furniture around or rolling heavy objects across the floor. Sometimes I also hear people's voices, like a woman laughing, or sometimes a man and a woman arguing. On one occasion, the noises were so loud that it woke my dog up. And our downstairs neighbor also heard it because he sent us a passive-aggressive note telling us to stop making so much noise at night. He described the rolling sounds and sounds of people walking in heels. This can't be us because my mom goes to sleep at 10 p.m. and my sister and I stay in our respective rooms. Also, none of us wear heels. Fast forward to this year, in January I think. My mom was out of town that night, so it was just me, my sister, our dog Amy and my boyfriend. My sister went to sleep, my boyfriend and I stayed in the living room watching a movie and eating popcorn. I got a bit sleepy so we paused the movie. We start hearing the noises from upstairs at around 1 a.m., and Amy stands up and starts growling like crazy, staring at a specific spot on the wall behind us. Needless to say, it was weird. We tried to get Amy's attention, calling her name and offering her treats, but she didn't look away for a second. And there's nothing on the wall behind us at all. The lights were very dim, so the living room wasn't fully illuminated, but the particular spot she was looking at had nothing but shadow. Amy was really annoyed at that thing. The only time I saw her like that is when she saw a cat. After a while, she stopped and went back to sleep. I can't remember if the noises stopped too. My boyfriend kept annoying me, telling me it was a ghost. He doesn't believe in the supernatural either, he was just pissing me off. It wasn't super scary, but it was very weird. I was 7 years old, I was in a pajama party. We started playing tag and I slipped and fell on a table at the bedrooms. I broke a cup. We went back to the living room because there were pieces of glass all over the room. After watching too many TV, me and my friends finally went to sleep. But I woke up and went to the bathroom. While passing ahead the bedroom, I saw the cup I broke, intact, also, there was no signs of glue on the cup. I thought someone replaced a glass with another one, but it was suspicious since my best friend's two mothers were sleeping. When I arrived at the living room, all my friends were awake and looking at the window. I saw shadows running at the beach. Her house is in front of the beach, but not human shadows, shadows of creatures like wolves, and we don't even have wolves in Brazil. It was making noises of people suffering or dying. I was so scared, and then I asked my best friend, "Hey Letitia, do you have two blue and yellow cups?" She said, "No." I was so scared to say that a shadow maybe was inside the house that I went to sleep. Next day, a girl called Mila asked all of us if we saw the shadows. Everyone answered yes. When I was a young child, I once dreamt that I found one of those clear plastic containers in an old closet while looking for something. I honestly can't recall. I opened it, and a whole man jumped out, wearing a Victorian suit, some kind of glasses, and a top hat. The man proceeded to beat me up, and he kept appearing in my dreams, or rather nightmares really, for a while. I obviously don't remember them all, but he often did really strange things like melting the moon and the sun, or creating a river in the middle of a room, and drowning me in it. I think he could also disguise himself as a sort of doll. One time, I dreamt that I was staying at someone's house while they were stoking a bonfire outside. I started unpacking my luggage when this character jumped out again and lunged at me. I wrestled with him for a bit before throwing the Baron out of the window into the fire, after which he went up in flames and never appeared again. Anyways, according to my mother, I also said some weird things as a child. The first time was when I had a fever and was lying on the couch. I informed her that there is a man sitting here. I was also once sitting in my parents' room and looking out into the hall. I apparently said, "You can go now. They can't see you." To nobody in particular. When my mother asked me who on earth I was talking to, I replied, "The man in the hall with the black eyes." Have had so many experiences, which all started after a Ouija board game. Which in itself was a horror movie type affair of very weird inexplicable things happening, including my very normal healthy brother having numerous fits afterwards while walking home. I didn't even take part, but I was there. I've moved a fair few times, so these take place in different houses. These are the most memorable ones. House number 1. The radio would come on full blast in the middle of the night. Weird smells like the smell of baby lotion would fill the room out of nowhere. My daughter, around 3 at the time, was crying and cowering at the sight of the sofa one day. I couldn't get her to come out. She told me that the girl on the stairs was shouting at her. When I moved out, a removal guy I had never met before said to me, "There isn't anything you need from upstairs, is there?" I said nope, all good. In the removal van traveling, he very sheepishly said that the reason he asked is because he thought he saw a figure of a girl in a white dress stood at the top of the stairs. Was so glad to get out of there. Same house, in my bedroom, you could see a tiny cluster of blue lights. I'd recanted the above stories to my boyfriend who didn't live with me, and being the non-believer he was like, "Right, sure." Until one night in bed, I woke up and saw them again, shook him and told him to look. His, "Right, sure," turned into, "Flurbo, what the heck is that?" My sister lives there now, and they do not use the top floor. Her stories are equally as frightening. House number 2. This was the first house I moved into with my daughter and her dad. One night, we had an argument and I left the lounge to go down the hall to our bedroom. I picked up my hairdryer, and at that moment, I heard someone say, "Kill him," right next to me. Like someone was talking right into my ear. I threw the hairdryer, ran to the lounge, slammed the doors shut, and sat with my back to the door in hysterics, explaining to my ex what happened. After a short time, I opened the door. We had a mirror at the end of the hall. The mirror was rigged up like the bathroom one would if you took a hot shower. All condensation, except for what looked like 5 tiny fingerprints and the shape of a cross. I refused to stay there. We went to stay with my parents and never went back to that house. My family often see figures walking into rooms from the corner of their eyes, but thankfully, none have seemed to cause trouble in the other houses. Top tip. No matter how much of a non-believer you are, don't flurbo about with Ouija boards.